I am Plato. To some, a philosopher. To others, a poet. To many, just a student. But if I had to describe myself in one word, I would choose this: a seeker. I am a seeker, a soul tracing the path of wisdom. I opened my eyes to the world during the springtime of Athens. The scent of olive trees, stone-paved streets, and the breeze from the sea, they still linger in my mind. My father, Ariston, used to tell me our bloodline went back to King Codrus. My mother, Perictione, spoke of Solon and the justice of laws. My family carried not just wealth, but a legacy of thought. In my youth, I wrote poetry, even tried epic tales. I was enchanted by beauty and order. I could sense the universe had a structure, but I didn't yet know how to reach it. My eyes were on the sky, but my heart beat inside chaos. Athens, at that time, was a glorious body rotting from within. Democrats, tyrants, warriors, sophists, they filled the streets. Everyone talked. No one really listened. I watched in silence, like a child lost in a crowd. Inside, I kept asking myself, what is right? That was the first time I learned how to look at my own mind from the outside. Who was I? Why did I hold certain beliefs? Was morality truly universal, or just a collective dream? I realized the answers weren't as important as the questions, and maybe that's why one sentence became the cornerstone of my life. An unexamined life is not worth living. One day, sitting alone at the foot of the Acropolis, I felt it. A voice deep within me whispered, "Your path has only just begun." Truth is not far, but it isn't easy either. Walk, ask, write, think, because only such a life is a life truly lived. And in that moment, I was no longer just a man. I became an idea, a question, a resonance, a search. I am Plato, but as I write these words to you, I still don't feel I've earned that name, because my true self began that day. The day I saw him, I was young, early 20s, well educated, raised by a noble family. I knew rhetoric, spoke eloquently. Teachers called me a bright mind, but inside, I felt hollow. No matter what I said, my words felt thin, like fragile glass that shattered the moment I stepped on it. One day, walking through the agora, I came upon a crowd, not a stage, not a palace, but a space vibrating with thought. People were gathered around a man. He wasn't standing above them. He didn't shout, but they were all listening because he was teaching them how to listen. I stepped closer. The man I saw was nothing like I expected. Not handsome, not imposing, but his eyes, those eyes saw through the world. They didn't look at a person. They looked into them. He was speaking to a young man that day, someone overconfident. Justice, the young man said, is giving each person what they deserve. Socrates paused, lowered his head slightly, and then calmly asked, "And how do you know what someone deserves? Can you give justice to someone who doesn't even know they are wrong? Is what you offer truly what they deserve, or only what you believe they do?" And everything I had memorized began to unravel. It was as if my mind was a stone wall, and this man had found the first crack. Through that tiny fracture, truth slipped in, cold but somehow freeing. He didn't teach with answers. He carved the soul with questions. He unearthed the ignorance buried beneath confidence. Over the years I spent with Socrates, I shed my former self. My noble birth meant little. Everything I thought I knew was just a chain of repetition. I stopped writing poetry because I no longer sought beauty in words. I started seeking it in thought. What I thought I knew was only what I had been told, I admitted to myself. Socrates didn't teach me. He only asked. But the right questions. They echoed deeper than 1,000 teachings. I began to follow him. Socrates had no classroom. His school was the street. His ceiling, the sky. His desk, the shade of a wall. His students, tailors, soldiers, aristocrats, children, and to each of them, he did the same. He asked, he waited, he listened, and then he asked again. One day, he turned to me and asked, "Plato, what is knowledge?" I answered, explaining something correctly. He smiled slightly and replied, "But what if your explanation is wrong? What if what you believe is only something you've repeated?" I froze, and something inside me shifted. Most of what I thought was mine was taught to me. Now, I wanted to think for myself. Days became years. Every day I was breaking apart, but I wasn't afraid, because what broke was the false part of me. He didn't teach me philosophy. He taught me myself, and with every realization, I became freer. To me, Socrates wasn't a man. He was a mirror, the kind you can't look away from. Look into his eyes, and you'd see your own soul. With him, I was not learning. I was rebuilding, brick by brick, word by word, truth by terrifying truth. Thinking became a need, like breathing, like hunger. And then, that voice, his voice, would one day fall silent, but I would carry it, always, until I found my own. I am Plato. As I write these words, I am 28 years old. But today, age means nothing, because inside me, time has stopped. The moment Socrates' voice went silent, so did time within me. Athens, once the center of virtue and reason, but in those days, shadows of fear and anger had fallen over the city. We had just emerged from the Peloponnesian War. The people were tired, hopeless, and like all frightened crowds, they did what frightened crowds do best. They looked for someone to blame. Socrates, he belonged to no one. He didn't blindly worship the gods. He didn't bow to rulers. He unsettled people because he forced them to face themselves. And that, to the people, was the unforgivable crime. He made them question. Charges were brought against him. 3, on paper, corrupting the youth, disbelieving in the gods, inventing new deities, but we all knew the truth. His real crime was thinking freely, and Socrates was about to pay the price for freeing thought. The courtroom was crowded. I was there, amidst the people, but I cannot describe the loneliness I felt. When Socrates began to speak, the very air in the room changed. He wasn't defending himself. He was speaking truth. "I am a gadfly," he said, "sent to stir this great city from its sleep." And something inside me broke. Then came the verdict. A narrow margin, but enough. Death. Silence fell. Some faces relaxed. Some admired. Some feared. I heard the sound of nothingness. But Socrates, he was calm, as if the verdict wasn't for him at all. He smiled. To fear death is to fear what you do not know, he said. Perhaps death is the greatest freedom. We visited him. I, Crito, Apollodorus, and a few others. Within the stone walls of the prison, he was still teaching. That night, he spoke of the soul's immortality, of the body's impermanence, but the mind's eternity. When he fell silent, we cried, but he did not. He just looked at us and let silence speak. That silence still echoes in my mind. Then came the hemlock. He sat. He took the cup and drank it in a single breath. He trembled. His legs grew numb. His back turned cold. And a teacher, a thought, an entire era fell silent before our eyes. I dropped to my knees. For the first time in my life, I heard silence scream. From that day on, nothing was ever the same. I was no longer a poet, no longer just a student. I had become a bearer of truth. The unexamined life is not worth living. That sentence now feels like it belongs to me, because I lived it, because now we carry it. Socrates died, but his ideas, they were just being born. I am Plato, and from now on, I will write his words, through dialogues, through thought, through memory, because sometimes a teacher's death is the beginning of a student's birth. I am Plato. When Socrates fell silent, it wasn't just a man who went quiet. It was the entire world inside me. All sounds suddenly lost their meaning, and I remained at the place where speech ends, but thought begins. That morning in Athens was just like any other. Birds were singing. The leaves of the olive trees rustled softly. Bread vendors called out in the marketplace. But I was walking through the city as if I couldn't see it. It was as if Athens had gone blind the moment his voice disappeared. Every street, every stone, every marble column whispered his shadow. Socrates was gone, but his questions still echoed on the walls like ancient wind. What is justice, Plato? Why does a ruler rule? How does the soul find salvation? I wanted to escape, but what did escape even mean? To flee a city, a memory, or myself? I left Athens, but not just the city. I left behind my beliefs, my habits, everything I once thought I knew. The hole inside me, after Socrates' death, was so vast that I had to change more than my place. I had to change my meaning. My first step took me to Egypt. Egypt was a place where time didn't move. The Nile flowed with patience. The sky brought the same sun every morning, and the people were never in a hurry. In Athens, every idea was debated, every word questioned. But here, everything was accepted, not blindly, but through a silence forged by centuries of wisdom. One morning, I walked among the temples. An old priest stopped me. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were young. He unrolled a papyrus scroll. On it, a heart on one side of a scale. On the other side, a single feather. If your heart is heavier than this feather, he said, your soul cannot be reborn. To the Egyptians, death wasn't the end. It was a passage, but one that came with a condition: to be remembered. If no one remembers you, they said, your soul cannot rise to the heavens. At first, I found this strange. In Athens, we expected nothing after death. But here, people carved their stories into their tombstones. A farmer's kindness, a mother's patience, a student's loyalty. Each was evidence of immortality. And then I understood. They didn't fear death. They feared being forgotten. Because to be forgotten is to never have existed. I witnessed a funeral. The crowd moved in silence. No one cried, but everyone prayed, let us not forget him. Let him live within us. That day I realized death was not just a personal fate. It was an agreement with the memory of the people. This struck me deeply, because Socrates too had died in a city that wanted to forget. To remember takes courage. So does questioning. The day I left the temple, the sun stung my eyes, but inside my mind, a different light had begun to shine. What if virtue exists to be remembered? What if immortality of the soul is simply a kind of memory? And what if true knowledge is not just what is learned, but what is remembered? That was the first time the idea of anamnesis, remembrance, entered my mind. And years later, that seed would grow into the roots of the theory of forms. I came to Egypt to escape, but Egypt taught me this. Questions are asked not only by the mind, but by memory and the heart. And in that moment, I understood. I was no longer just a thinker. I had become a vessel. Socrates' voice echoed through Egypt's silence, and I was becoming the one who would carry the echo forward. Later, I sailed to Italy. A sea voyage, yes, but truly, it was the longest journey inward. I was no longer interested in what I saw, but in the order behind what I saw. And in the south of Italy, I heard that order for the first time. A school without loud voices, but infinite teaching, the legacy of Pythagoras. There I met one of Pythagoras' direct students, a man with a long beard, plain clothes, and words that struck deep. He sat on a stone and began to play a lyre. The first note, soft. The second, balanced. The third, the perfect complement. Then he played a wrong note, and the harmony collapsed. Tones clashed. Inside my mind, a vibration was born. He turned to me and said, when one note is wrong, the whole song breaks. Isn't society the same, Plato? One corrupt ruler spoils the soul of a people. The Egyptians had shown me the symbols of immortality. But here, these people were teaching me the laws of the universe. Numbers were not just measurements. They were moral balance, rhythmic order, the language of being. In Athens, we believed what we saw, but here, we sought the order hidden beneath what we heard. Two is not just two, they said. It represents duality, sun and moon, good and evil, justice and injustice. And I thought, if the universe moves like a harmonic sequence of notes, why shouldn't a city or a soul move with the same harmony? One day, in a temple-like classroom, they showed me a symbol, a 5-pointed star, the pentagram, its symmetry, its overlapping ratios, the golden proportion, they called it. This figure, my teacher said, is the mathematics of both beauty and virtue. because nature doesn't exist in chaos. It lives in measure, and that moment, a concept blossomed in my mind. The form of things. Everything in the material world was just a reflection of its ideal version. That night, I asked myself, can a state be like a pentagram? If every class, every person, holds their rightful place, will the state too flow like a song? That was the first time I realized a state is not only built on law, but on harmony, and perhaps virtue is the mathematical balance within the soul. In Italy, from people who spoke the language of numbers, I learned that a city should not be ruled by power alone, but by order, because a ruler is like a note in a melody. If played wrong, the whole music of society falls apart. I am Plato. When I finally arrived in Syracuse, the sea breeze brushed my face, and inside me, there was hope. This time, maybe, I wouldn't just write, I would apply, not to build a new state, but to transform the one that already stood. The streets of Syracuse were rich, marble-paved roads, golden-trimmed columns, and soldiers whose eyes carried not hunger, but arrogance, and the palace. What struck me was not its grandeur, but its emptiness. Young King Dionysius, he was powerful and feared, but I had heard he liked philosophy. A voice inside whispered, maybe this time the philosopher's word will come before the sword. I spoke with him. He smiled at me. He even listened to my ideas. For a while, I became his advisor. How does one build a just government? Can a king be virtuous? Can wisdom and power coexist? He seemed to listen, but in every answer, something was missing. Honesty. One day, I publicly warned him. I spoke against a decision that crushed the people. I said, soldiers should rule with respect, not fear. His eyes changed. His smile vanished into a cold silence. And in that moment, I understood. What is truth to a philosopher is a threat to a king. I questioned him, but my questions came back as accusations. One morning, palace guards came to my door. No trial, no defense, just one order. Take him. Was thrown into a cell, stone walls, damp air, and only my thoughts for company. Even time stopped there, because the punishment for thinking is loneliness. And then my name was heard in the slave market. I stood among people, not as a philosopher, but as property. Strangers inspected my teeth, my hands. They placed a price on me. My worth no longer lay in my words, but in my body. Plato, I whispered to myself, the one who chased ideals, now bound by a chain. But maybe this too is a lesson. What a king could not teach, perhaps a chain will. Just when I thought it was over, a friend appeared, perhaps an angel in disguise. He bought me, not to own me, but to free me. And in that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears, because for the first time, freedom was not just an idea, it was an act. That day, I wrote in my notebook, philosophy is not just speaking truth, it's paying the price for it. And the most dangerous thought is the one that questions in silence. When I left Syracuse, the sun didn't burn on my back. It burned in my chest. I was no longer a philosopher, but a broken man. Yet from this break, a greater idea would rise. Socrates' death had shown me what was lost. Syracuse showed me what could never be built. Perhaps a truly just society is not built out there, but inside the soul of a person. Ideas cannot be chained, but the body can be. To be a philosopher in this world is not to be free, but to be alone. Years later, I returned to Athens, the city where Socrates had died, but the only place I might be reborn. This time, I didn't want to be alone, because I no longer sought only to learn, but to teach. A new thought had taken root in my mind, and it was searching for its own ground. What is a just state? How can philosophy become law? Is virtue just an idea? Or can it be a system? And in the shade of Academos's garden, I built the academy, not a school of stone, but a school of thought. At its entrance, I wrote, "Let no one enter who does not know geometry, because one who cannot understand order cannot order their soul." I took up the pen again, but this time, not for poetry. I began to write questions. Socrates kept speaking, through the pages, through the minds of my students, in the labyrinth of ideas. And within me, a new state was being born, a city of real justice, a harmony ruled by knowledge, guided by virtue. I named it Politeia, not just a book, but a longing, a dream, an aspiration. I am Plato. I have traveled. I have seen. I have broken. And now I write again, because his voice still speaks in my mind. Question, Plato. Think and remember. Truth is not just in the answers you find, but in the courage to stay true to them. I am Plato. I have walked the roads. I have fallen into dungeons. I watched a teacher die, and now another mountain stands before me, not of stone, but of thought. This is no longer about designing a city. It is about rebuilding the human soul. I asked myself, what has kept me going? Socrates' death, his teachings, or is it that quiet emptiness inside me, the one I could never name? It was that emptiness that drove me to write Politeia, the Republic. But this was not just a plan for political structure. It was a search. What is justice? Who is just? And how can a just person emerge from a just society? Something began to clarify in my mind. The world we perceive with our senses is incomplete. Everything I saw changed, decayed, faded, disappeared. But what if something unchanging exists? What if beauty, justice, and goodness have a form, an idea, beyond what we see? Then what we perceive in this world are only shadows, not the truth itself, but its reflections. And in that moment, a metaphor was born in my mind. The cave. Imagine people chained inside a dark cave. They can only see the wall in front of them. They see shadows cast by real objects behind them, but they do not know the objects, nor the light, nor the sun that creates them. One person breaks free. They climb upward. It hurts at first. Then they adjust to the light, and finally, they see the sun. Who is that person? The one who asks. The questioner. And what does the questioner do? He returns to the cave, because truth, even if impossible to explain in shadows, must be brought back. Then another question arose in me. Is there a city within the soul? And I saw that, yes, The human soul is made of 3 parts: reason, will, desire, and what is justice? When each part does its own work, justice in the soul is harmony, just like in a city. When the wise rule, the brave protect, and the moderate follow, only then is the state just. As I wrote, the words did not come from my mind, but from my soul, because now what I wrote was not just theory, but longing. Knew I might never live to see that state, but perhaps someone would read about it and build it inside themselves. So I asked again and again, what is good? Why is beauty beautiful? When does a person become good? Is it knowledge, belief, or intuition that leads us to truth? And within each question, a new world opened. Socrates was dead, but his voice never silenced. When I wrote, he was always there, sometimes sitting across from me. Sometimes I debated with him inside my own mind, but never, not once, did I write alone. Phaedo, Symposium, Theaetetus, the Republic, each one an echo of an inner voice. I am Plato, and after all this journey, I know this much. Reality is not what we sense. It is what we understand, what we question, what we have the courage to change. Maybe I never built a city, but I drew a map of thought. I left Socrates' questions as seeds for future generations to answer, and I learned the greatest answers sometimes begin as beautifully asked questions. As I write these words to you, my body is old, but my mind still young with questions. My eyes no longer see clearly, my hands tremble, but my pen still flows, as if it moves through the veins of my soul. The academy I founded in the shade of Academos' grove no longer belongs to me alone. Each morning, the young come. They arrive with their questions, then return with their words. And as I watch them, a quiet peace grows within me. When I die, this building may fall, but this was never just a building. It is a way of thinking, a discipline of questioning. I do not say this is the truth, but I do hope each one finds their own way to see it, because thought begins only when the eyes truly open. Now, every word I write feels heavier, each sentence like a farewell letter. Once, I wrote the Republic, but now I wonder, perhaps the most just society is the one we build within ourselves. Once, I spoke of ideas, but now I know every idea is a reflection of something we deeply long for. Once, I searched for the meaning of virtue. Now I understand. Virtue is knowing how to live before we die. And as I write these final lines, a voice echoes in my ear. The unexamined life is not worth living. Mornings have become quieter now. I sit in the garden of the academy. A student approaches, a young face. Teacher, he asks, what is the most important question? I look at his face. Years ago, I asked that same thing to Socrates. Now, it's my turn. I smile, and I give only one answer, the one you dare to ask. Soon, I will fall silent. I know this, but death is not an end for me. Socrates once taught me, philosophy is the art of preparing for death. And now, I am ready. Because I did not merely live, I questioned. And even if this world forgets me, I know this, the questions will remain. The dialogues will continue, and someday a child will ask again, and in that moment, I will still be alive. I am Plato. Aristotle was my student, but truly I was always the student of Socrates. And if one day someone remembers my name, let this be my only wish. Remember not my name, but my questions, because philosophy does not belong to one man. It is the endless echo that lives within us all.